Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Psychology from My Kitchen. I'm Mrs. Sarah Ryan, and today we are continuing in Unit 5 of AP Psychology, Sensation and Perception. And we're going to begin looking at some of the sensory systems in our bodies, starting with our number one, the eye. So, your eyes as an organ are amazing. They do countless cool things every single day. So, one of the big issues in sensation and perception, and as part of psychology, is that our bodies are responsible for taking this outside world and bringing it into our bodies. But there's an added challenge to all of this in that your body is a physical organism that has to transfer one form of energy into another because we know that vision is dealing with light and there isn't any light in your brain. That'd be super weird if there were, because if there was light in your brain, then you'd have light shooting out of all the different holes in your head, and that'd look really freaky. So you don't have any light in there, but light is what's out here. And so your eyes have to take that light energy and transform it into something that your brain can understand. And there's two things that your brain is capable of understanding. Your brain understands chemicals, okay? It understands chemical messengers and things like that with our neurotransmitters. So, like chemical information, we got that. We can do that. But the other thing that the brain understands is electrical information with our action potentials. And that's going to be a little bit trickier. So, here's where your eyeballs come in. One of the really cool things that your eyes, and actually as well as your ears, are capable of doing is called sensory transduction. Sensory transduction is a process where you are able to convert one form of energy into another form of energy. And your eyes do this all the time by converting light energy into electrical energy in the form of a neural impulse. And so, why your eyes are so incredibly important to you in your sense of vision is that they take the outside world of light and transform it into that neural impulse, into an action potential. And so, when you see and you see the whole color spectrum, you're doing that by processing this visual information and creating it into something that your brain can understand. So let's take a tour of the eyeball. Maybe. Maybe not. My slides won't advance. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so first of all, there's two characteristics of light that are going to change the differences in what I experience. So light comes in the form of a wave, and the difference in size and shape of that wave is actually going to determine what it is that I can see in terms of color and in terms of vibrancy or intensity. So your wavelength is your distance from peak to peak, okay? And that the shorter the wavelength, as here, the bluer the color is going to be, okay? So when you talk about colors of the rainbow and your Roy G. Biv, okay, as we get down to that Biv end, that's where we're going to have shorter wavelengths. Whereas my longer wavelengths are what's going to give me my red colors. And then, of course, all the other colors in between. And so wavelength is determining the color that I'm going to be able to see, the color that I'm going to experience from the wavelength. Now, amplitude is talking about the intensity or the amount of energy that my light wave is going to produce. And so that's coming from my amplitude. And amplitude is from peak to trough. And that the greater the amplitude, the taller my wave is going to be, the brighter or more intense the color is that I'm going to see. Whereas a duller color, something that is lighter, that's going to be a softer amplitude, a more dull sort of color. So actually, if I grab part of my grocery list here and my cell phone. Now my cell phone's a little difficult to see, but this is kind of like a duller pink, and this is going to be kind of a neon color. So my neon colors come from those greater amplitudes. So there you go. Now my eye. Okay, so your eyes are not perfectly round, and they are kind of gross in that they have like this jelly-like fluid that's on the inside of them. But your eyes start with an outer layer that is a protective coating, which is known as your cornea. Your cornea is very, very sensitive. So if any of you have ever scratched your cornea, you know exactly how painful that is, because the cornea has got to keep your whole eye together. Okay, having damage to your cornea could potentially, damage your entire eye. So that's going to be a bad thing, right? So light is going to enter into your eye, and it enters into the hole that is in your eye, which is your pupil. So your pupil is black because it is a hole that goes into the inside of your eye. And so that is for light to come into. I have no idea why in my diagrams my eyeball is always looking at a candle, but that's what we have going on here. So the eye, this image of the candle, is going to enter into the pupil. So the pupil is what is creating the light. Now, surrounding your pupil, hold on, I don't know if that's going to be, here it is. So surrounding your pupil is actually going to be a colored muscle, which is known as your iris. Your iris is actually going to be determined based on, your iris is a colored muscle. It's going to be dependent on your genetics, similar to, your skin color and hair color and stuff like that. And your iris as a muscle, the only thing that muscles can do is they can contract and they can release. And your iris does this by adjusting the amount of light that is allowed to enter into your eye at any given time. And so when we talk about pupil dilation, dilating is going to refer to something getting bigger, okay? That pupils are going to dilate in order to allow more light energy to enter into your eye. So for example, when there's low light, twilight, it's really dark, your pupils get really big as they're attempting to get as much light information to come into the eye at any given moment. But it's actually the iris that is adjusting all of that. And so the iris is this colored muscle that can contract when it detects that there's a lot of light present. Similarly, for those of you who go to the eye doctor, your eye doctor might put drops in your eye to purposefully not allow the pupil to contract, which means that they are going to put an antagonist, actually it would be an acetylcholine antagonist, into your eyes to prevent the lens from closing, right? So they can see more in your eyes, which is horribly uncomfortable. Okay, now actually I'm going to go back to talk about my retina. So I have my iris, my color part, my cornea is the outer layer. That light is going to come into my eye, and it's actually going to hit my lens. Now your lens, just like those of you who have contact lenses or you have eyeglass lenses, a lens is responsible for bending or refracting light. And the lens that is in your eyeball is also going to bend or refract light. Now this is where we come to one of our problems with vision, because any of you who are like me and survive on glasses or contacts, you likely do that because the lens that is in your eye is not refracting the light accurately. And that can happen for a couple of different reasons. One of the most common ones has to do with the length of your eyeball. But what's supposed to happen is that this image is coming into your eye, it's going to be refracted on the lens, and then it gets reflected onto the back of my eye. And the back of my eye is really where all the magic happens. The back of my eye is known as my retina, and it is my retina that is going to do the sensory transduction. Your retina is going to take this entire back space of your eye, However, there's two elements to the retina. You have what's known as the fovea. The fovea is your central point of focus, and it's the area of the retina that is immediately behind the pupil, so it's straight across from the pupil. Your fovea is your central point of focus because this is where you see best. Okay, this is where you see best. And actually, immediately below that, you're going to have a blind spot. And your blind spot is where your optic nerve is going to exit out of your eyeball. And so you do not have any receptors there at your blind spot that can do sensory transduction, and that is why it is a blind spot. So these are the major elements of my eyeball. I have the cornea, my outer layer that's going to protect my eye. I have my pupil, which is a hole to allow light in. That's regulated by the muscle, the iris. Light comes into the lens, it hits the lens, and the lens refracts that image. Notice how it flips the image upside down. Now, you don't see upside down because of your brain. Your brain is going to turn that image right side up again. You also generally don't see these, you're going to have blood vessels inside of your eye. The eye itself is not hollow. It's made up of a jelly-like fluid substance that you don't see as well. And those are all things that your brain is going to clear out for you and that you won't see them. The retina is the back of the eye that's going to do the sensory transduction. You see this best at the fovea, and you don't see it at all at the blind spot. Now, I mentioned about being able to see well. How well we see is referencing something known as visual acuity. Acuity is talking about how well my lens is going to be able to refract that image. Now, in my diagram A here, we have exactly what's supposed to happen, that the image is accurately reflected back onto the retina. Everything's gravy. But for a lot of you, myself included, you are what's known as nearsighted. In a person who is nearsighted, their eyeballs are slightly longer than normal. They're longer than they are supposed to be. Nearsighted means that I can see near me, which means that I can't see very well far away. And so what happens in nearsightedness is that the lens, when it's refracting that image, the accurate image gets refracted before it hits the retina. So then the light that hits the retina is out of focus. And that's why you use glasses or contacts. They're going to readjust that refraction to get an accurate image onto the back of your eye, and thus you can see better. And so that's why people wear glasses or contacts, is that it's helping to refract that light. Now, if you were to go and do like, what's the lens surgery that the name is escaping me, what you would have done, LASIK, there it is. If you were to have like LASIK eye surgery done, you actually cut into the eye and you manipulate the lens inside of the eye itself. So you don't use glasses or contacts to bend or refract the light. You actually manipulate the lens that is inside of the eyeball. Now, for farsightedness is far less common in younger people, but as we age, it becomes increasingly common, and this is where I cannot see close up. Many of you might have parents or grandparents who talk about having their readers or their cheaters, which are eyeglasses that they wear predominantly for being able to read books or like to look at their phones or to look at a menu in a restaurant, that they cannot see those things that are close up. Or you might even see them, doing one of these numbers where they're holding it out farther from them so that they can see better. So farsightedness is typically going to happen because the eyeball becomes shorter than normal. Now, farsightedness in aging might have to do with the shape of the eyeball, but it also is probably going to have to do with the shape of the lens as well. But in farsightedness, that accurate image is going to be reflected beyond the retina. So again, the image that hits the retina is one that is out of focus. And so that's what happens with our visual acuity. Now, to focus a little bit more of our attention on the retina itself, because the retina is where the magic happens, right? This is where we have sensory transduction. that we are converting light energy into a neural impulse. And we do this by following a very specific series of cells that are going to be on the retina themselves. So what's going to happen is that light is going to enter into the eye, and it's going to create a photochemical reaction for these specific cells on the back of the retina known as rods and cones. So your rods and cones are actually what does the sensory transduction. Okay, they are the ones who are converting this light energy into the neural impulse. And they start off a chain of events. So it's the rods and cones, which the rods are demonstrated here in my diagram in blue, and the cones are in yellow. They're going to be attached to a series of cells known as bipolar cells. These bipolar cells are going to converge into ganglion cells, and all of the ganglion cells are what's going to come together to form the optic nerve. And the optic nerve would then go back into your brain and attach to the thalamus. So this is a three-stage process. We start with my rods and cones, we go to my bipolar cells, we go to my ganglion cells. Now, the rods and cones are really what is the most crucial element here in my retina. Rods are receptors for detecting black, white, and all of my grays. And they're necessary for all of my peripheral vision and my twilight vision when my cones don't respond. So my rods are what allow me to see when there is very little light. And you'll notice that when there's very little light, you don't see very well, and you also don't see any colors. And that's because you need cones. Cones are responsible for seeing colors and for seeing clearly. That these are concentrated near the fovea of my retina. So remember how we said that my fovea is where I see best? Well, I see best because that's where all my cones are located. And so when your pupil is all small and contracted, it's activating all of those cones that are right there, but your pupils dilate and get bigger to get the rods that are on the outside. So my cones are what's going to able to detect fine details, but it's also going to be determining the colors that I see. Speaking of the colors that I see, many of you are probably familiar with the fact that you have color vision, but that color vision is not the same for every individual, and that in just a moment we're going to talk about color deficiency or color blindness. So when you were in art class, you probably learned about the three primary colors of paint, which are red, blue, and yellow. And that if you mix red, blue, and yellow, that you're going to get all the colors on the color wheel. And if you mix them all together, you're going to get like a brownish black color. Well, not to confuse you, but you have primary colors of light. And your primary colors of light are slightly different than your primary colors of paint. In primary colors of light, your colors are red, blue, and green. And that when you mix red, blue, and green light together, you get white light. And so this is how colors are going to reflect the different lights the different colors that I see. Now, Young and Helmholtz developed a color theory, which is sometimes known as a three-color theory, or it's the trichromatic color theory, arguing that the reason why we have these three primary colors of light and what makes us as human beings so much better at being able to see our colors is that we actually have three different types of cones. And guess what those cones are? That we have red cones, we have blue cones, and we have green cones. And that in order for us to detect colors very clearly is that we activate our red cones, our blue cones, and our green cones. And that in doing these in different color combinations allows us to see all the different colors of the rainbow. This trichromatic color theory is made even more clear when we talk about people who experience color deficiency. Sorry about that, had to pull up another tab. Okay, so what this really helps us to understand then, of course, is color deficiency. Now, color deficiency is actually the technical term that we use for color blindness. Color blindness really isn't a very accurate way to describe people who have difficulty with color, because it's actually very, very rare for a person to not see any colors at all. That instead, color blindness is referring to a deficiency in that I don't see colors as well, not that I don't see color at all. We know that color deficiency is dominated by genetics, and that males are much more likely to experience color deficiency than females because it's on the X chromosome. And so because females have 2 X chromosomes and males only have 1 X chromosome, for a female to have color deficiency, both of her X chromosomes have to be color deficient. Whereas with a male, because they only have 1, that significantly increases their likelihood of being color deficient. Color deficiency is going to actually tell us that one or more of my cones is not working the way that it is supposed to be. And the most common cones that have problems are your red cones and your green cones. Because of red-green color blindness or red-green deficiency, what's going to happen is that the colors themselves won't be as vibrant. So it's kind of like how you would describe what is the color red, but to a person who is red-green colorblind, their red might actually appear more brownish, okay? And whereas then they also might not have any problems with blues, but then might have problems with purples because of the combination of red and blue to make our different purple colors. I actually want to reference a video that I really appreciate on YouTube. It is titled, oh, that's not the right one. It's titled How Color Blindness Works. And this is something that I highly recommend to watch to get a better idea of what exactly happens in color blindness. And it's something that I would share with my own students about what exactly is happening to a person who has a color deficiency. The other thing about color deficiency and how colors work is that our cones and our rods are going to have opposing processes, something known as opponent process theory, that when we turn on one of our rods and cones, that they're going to become weakened the more that they experience that particular color. And so their opposite is going to be ready and raring to go once that color is away. And so opponent process theory is going to tell us that we have these opposing retinal processes in our retina that are at work that also help enable our color vision. So for example, when you look at my flag here, you probably are going to recognize that it's supposed to be a British flag, but the colors are all wrong. Now, it doesn't so work as well on a computer screen, but if you have your textbook with you, it would work much, much better. If you were to stare at this image of the Union Jack in black, yellow, and green, if you were to stare at that for a long time, not blinking, solid minute or so, if you were to look away, and especially if you look at a white or light colored surface and you blink, you're going to see what's known as an after image. The after image is kind of like if somebody's using the flash on their camera and taking a bunch of pictures and you see like that dot all over in your vision, but that is an after image. So if you stare at this image and then look away and look at something white and blink, you're probably going to see the flag, but you should see the flag in the appropriate colors in the red, white, and blue. And that's because these are its opposite colors. These are the opposing colors. And so when you weaken these, you're making their opposites stronger so that when you look away, you would be able to see them. Last thing for today then are Hubel and Wiesel. These are 2 psychologists who actually were able to identify clusters of cells in our occipital lobes that are going to deal with some primary elements of vision, and that's going to include these specific feature detectors. This is telling us how vision is a multifaceted kind of experience, that we're going to have certain areas of the brain that are dedicated to edges, other areas for seeing lines, seeing angles, seeing movements. And any single one of those things can go wrong. Because when we focus on the idea that, my image is being dictated by my eyes, that, when things go wrong with my eyes, that of course is going to include my blindness. But blindness can happen because of damage to the brain. And that's where we see individual elements of vision can become distorted because it's not the eye that is unable to see, but it is the brain that is unable to see. So next time we're going to start exploring the different experiences of hearing. Until then, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.